And we're back. I'm Bill Hellkamp of Reach Development Systems, and with me is Professor Scott Plum of the Minnesota Sales Institute.
Most relationship-based sales don't happen on the first call. Often the first call is the first step in the sales process. The bigger the sale, the longer the process, the more steps. Each step is an investment of energy and time with a shared risk on both sides of the table. How can we increase the likelihood of winning the sale with each step? So get ready to learn more about follow through or follow up and much more on episode 421 of Get in the Door podcast.
Our book club is dealing with the book, The Challenger Sale, Taking Control of the Customer Conversation by Matthew Dixon and Brent Adamson. We are now on chapter 4, Teaching for Differentiation, Part 1, Why Insight Matters. So one of the big 3 areas was to teach for differentiation, and now we're going into details about that and why a lot of this chapter was why just question-based selling techniques aren't enough. We can't presume that if we ask enough questions, the customer will know what they need, but the Challenger salesperson is able to come up with new ideas that the client, the prospect, didn't even know that they needed. How did that strike you, Scott?
I agree with that, and I always wanted to point out, and I say this often, every time it comes into differentiating or being different, different doesn't always mean better. It just means different. And I think one thing that I think salespeople need to realize when they're talking to somebody is to concentrate on separating themselves from the current situation and offering something better, but not necessarily different. I thought about when I got my iPhone and I went from a BlackBerry, I could text and drive on a BlackBerry because there was a keyboard there. Not that I did it. I could do it. Then I switched to the iPhone.
It was illegal.
Right, yeah. But on the iPhone, you can't text very easily. It's my fat fingers, and there's not a texture to the keyboard, so it's a lot more. Well, it's different. It doesn't mean that it's better. And it became very frustrating to me when I was hoping to improve, but I wasn't in one feature. So keep in mind that sometimes change creates a bigger problem, and we need to make sure that we have a complete understanding about what the goal is for the prospect before we start offering solutions. And one of the things that I think this chapter points out is that our prospects, through the Challenger sales model, is the willingness to join in a solution journey and to really work together. In last session, we talked about the constructive tension, and we teach, tailor, and take control. I think we need to also manage that when it comes to the solution journey with the prospect. So customers are more satisfied, but not necessarily more loyal as they're looking at different changes. So we need to make sure that we maintain that loyalty. I saw loyalty a lot in this chapter, and maybe I was just looking for something that I ended up finding, kind of like market research. We do market research to justify our current position. We don't necessarily do research to find out what's out there.
Well, I think that one of the things that they seem to feel their research showed was that price valuation isn't going to keep the sale. High quality isn't necessarily going to keep them buying. And I think what they were saying was that these areas like high customer value scores or high price value ratio, everyone's doing that. And that your competition is good and competent, and therefore those are just things that are going to get you into the ball game. And now the way that your salesperson creates the relationship, and I don't mean a happy-dappy relationship like they talk about with relationship selling, but a valued partner relationship that now challenges the assumptions of the individuals at the company, brings new information, brings new value to the table so that you're as much consulting as you are selling.
Yeah. I think a great question that they ask is, does loyalty build on the lowest price or the best brand or product development or customer service? And loyalty is built on not what you sell, but how you sell it. It's amazing what happens when you sell something and there's a problem and the prospect engages with customer service or who's in charge of the customer experience, and there's a challenge and there's a solution and it's solved, that loyalty from the customer goes up because they know they can rely on somebody to solve the problem, which reinforces that the journey is something that's worth changing because they feel like they're not in it alone.
Well, one of the things I thought they brought to the fore, which I have to agree with, and that is that most salespeople's selling style, what they bring to the table, are so painful and useless that they feel that the customer often feels they just wasted an hour with them. And I do think that you've got to bring a consulting mind into the sales process now. Not just how can we help you solve your problems, but how can we help you identify new issues that perhaps you hadn't thought of yet and bring our value to play on those issues rather than just showing you feature benefit, feature benefit, feature benefit. So what do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. That's the close, right? What do you think, close?
No, what do you think, close? It's one of my favorites. But you got to do it this way. You got to go, so what do you think? Got to have a little rhythm to it. You can't just go, so what do you think? It's
right.
You got to lead them on with that long.
That's an upending sentence. So if you ever get any calls from folks from Canada, they love those upending sentences. Sorry, but there's a few things they point out in the book. Commercial teaching rule number 1: lead with your unique strength, and I think that's always valuable when you look at your value proposition. The second one is getting into.
Well, let's not go through them quickly, because I think this was the guts of this.
Yeah.
So how do we lead to our unique strength? You said value proposition. That's the same note that I put down for this myself. And in my mind, it's still about asking questions. It's about asking questions to drive to those areas where you have a unique value that you bring to the table. It's the uniqueness. Otherwise, one of the problems they talked about was, I'm going to do all this consulting and then they're going to buy from somebody else. So that's why this is so important, is that you need to drive to your product as the unique solution.
Right. And sometimes that can be called showrooming in the retail environments, where a customer comes into a shop, a store, they learn something from a clerk, they end up taking all that knowledge, then they go online and they save $20. Well, the person that gave them all the knowledge deserves a sale and deserves credit and deserves compensation, however that is. And it's almost unethical to go into a retail store, take the person's knowledge, and then buy it at a cheaper price, when in reality that knowledge is value and people should buy on value and not necessarily the cheapest price.
Well, then maybe the salesperson in the store ought to teach them how to close the deal.
Well,
as we talked about last week, but they don't teach them anything about selling in these stores anymore. They teach them to be the shell answer man. And if you're going to teach them that, then I'm going to go and get my answers.
Yeah. That's a sad
and I think most of the young people that I talk to, my kids, that's what they do.
Well, it's a culture. It's like, if you can download the music for free, why would we ever want to pay for it?
Well. All right. The second one is to challenge the customer's assumptions. And one of the things that really caught with me is you need to get the customer not saying, oh, okay, that's a great idea, but to get them saying, I never thought of it that way before.
You always want to ask, and I think it's a great question, is have you been through this before? What's the process you've been through like this before? Tell me what worked, what didn't work. If you had a chance to do it over, what would you do different? Now you're basing some of your answers based on their past experiences, because everybody carries a negative or positive bias and judgment from the past forward when they start making decisions. And if we don't know what they are, we're kind of working in the minefield of what's going to really cause them to be guarded and skeptical of misconceptions, versus what do we need to reaffirm to know that this is going to be different if they had a bad experience in the past.
Absolutely. So and I didn't really understand the catalyze action piece of it. What does that mean to you? That was step 3.
It talks about the compelling business cases and why action matters in the first place. So what is the initiator? What is the problem that they want to avoid either now or in the future?
I thought they didn't know the problem they wanted to avoid now or in the future. That was the problem.
Well, asking the right questions, hopefully they understand what the problem is or what some of the symptoms are to be able to get their hands around the problem, and or the salesperson is going to challenge them to think differently so that they end up deciding to go on that solution journey together.
Yeah.
And that loyalty is built on not what you sell, but how you sell it. And loyalty is won by being in the trenches in every conversation that you have. So hopefully in those conversations where the challenger salesperson has more knowledge, understands the symptoms, and is able to suggest different solutions, that the prospect is going to be considering in the future.
Earlier in the chapter, they talked about we don't really just need to ask questions anymore, and they tried to make a big deal out of it. And I think they overplayed that hand a little bit, because I don't think you can learn the things you need to learn if you're not really skilled at asking questions. The real skill then is taking those answers and codifying it into a way to challenge those customers' assumptions, and then driving them toward action versus, as you say, the showrooming, where they'll then use your information somewhere else. So as Steve Keating talked about last week, I think catalyzing them to action is getting them to work with you, perhaps, versus waiting on it and looking for a cheaper option that will do the same.
Yeah, I think one of the themes of the book is a challenger salesperson is not going up to a customer and saying, what's keeping you up at night? They're saying, here's what should be keeping you up at night, and then giving recommendations, changes in the marketplace, or similar scenarios with companies and industries where they're able to solve a problem or prevent it from occurring in the first place.
Well, haven't you talked, though, in the past, if my memory serves me, that you don't like salespeople being too assumptive, like they know everything about the customer already?
I agree with that position. And that's one of the things that keeps prospects very guarded is salespeople assuming that everybody has a problem and assuming everybody wants to change and assuming that everybody wants to buy their solution.
But in some ways, isn't that what the challenger sale is saying to do?
It's challenging the existing position in a way where it's causing the prospect to think about things differently and considering new areas where a company is going to have to change in order to keep up and grow. And if they don't, they're going to get left behind. So
isn't that a really nice, fancy way of saying, I'm assuming you have a problem, you just don't know about it yet?
Right. Or in asking enough questions in the process of the challenger sale, they're creating that emotional engagement where they're starting to understand the costs, consequences, and risks of inaction and considering different options. Now, if the challenger salesperson is doing it tactfully, is building trust and rapport along the same way, they're going to build respect from the prospect and they're going to build that loyalty with that salesperson. And the prospect is not going to consider going anyplace else because of the relationship that's built, but the relationship is not the end game. It's part of the process.
Well, they might still go another place if they're more of a price buyer than they are of
exactly.
So that's what you need to find out. The last step was scale across customers. And basically, from my reading of that, what they were saying is there's a limited number of insights that your product, process, service is going to bring to the fore. You need to supply them. And that's how this can become not a unique, I'm a great consultant type of selling process, but everyone can do this if they understand these insights and can reuse these insights over again.
Yeah, good advice.
Yeah. I guess the real key then is let's keep reading. We'll have a step 2 or a part 2 of this teaching process and see where that takes us.
And we welcome comments about what you think about the book so far, some of the chapters we've covered. If anything, Bill and I say you don't agree with, or it's not working in your industry, or it's not working in your company or with your customers or your prospects, let's talk about it. You can go to the website, getinthedoorpodcast.com. There's a form there. Both Bill and I have our emails. You're welcome to email us directly, either one of us or both of us. That's up to you, but we'd really be grateful for your feedback on how the book is going so far, how you're applying it, things you agree with, things that work, things that don't work. So let's talk about it. This segment of Get in the Door podcast is brought to you by The Art of Prospecting, your guide to getting in the door by Steve Kloida.
Steve Kloida was known internationally for increasing salespeople's ability to make solid appointments with qualified prospects. You too can learn this essential skill by ordering a copy of his superb book, The Art of Prospecting, your guide to getting in the door. In this book, Steve shares the top strategies and tactics he has developed, implemented, and personally tested with more than 1 million sales and prospecting calls. You can get his book on the website, theprospectingexpert.com. In addition, check out his other great online resources. Instant Sales Coaching, which will guide you through 5 online success modules. A guided prospecting process entitled Call Reluctance Transformer, and the Magnetic Selling Strategies Workbook, a detailed step-by-step guide to increasing your sales. Get any of these valuable resources at theprospectingexpert.com.
So our topic today is follow through or foul up. And this is a topic, I think, Bill, that came up from one of our discussions a few podcasts ago when we were talking about when you get introduced to somebody within a company and then you get referred to somebody else in the company that handles that. You always want to be able to maintain your relationship with the first person that you talk to. And that follow-up is so important, and keeping track of that initial conversation that you had with a higher up. So always call as high up in the organization as you feel comfortable. If you end up talking with somebody that's in a mid-level, maybe find out how they go about making decisions around here. And a good question to ask is, besides you, who else is involved in making a decision around here? And you might get some people that are involved in a little higher up. Now, you have to be cautious about starting the conversation with them because you've got a contact that you need to work with in order for the project to be implemented and bought from. So there's something that you have to be very careful about. So I think this is where the topic came from, and it's a really important topic, and I think that it's really necessary. I mean, like we said in the opening, the longer the sale, the more steps there are, the more relationship focused it is, the more steps they are. And if we're not following through on the steps, we're not demonstrating value. We're not demonstrating commitment. We're not demonstrating our persistence to be able to service our customers and the confidence that we have in our company, our products, and our services. So when we don't follow up, we're not demonstrating value. We're not demonstrating confidence. What do prospects buy when they're buying a service? They're buying confidence, credibility. They're buying a promise. The promise is only as good as the bearer of the promise. The salesperson is the one that initiates the promises. That's what customers buy, and that's why I think this topic is so important. Anything you want to add to that, Bill?
Well, when I thought about follow-up, I thought there's two really different situations for follow-up, and then you brought up a third in your comment, and that was really long-term after the sale follow-up. But first of all, I think a follow-up in terms of prospecting. And I think it's really different type of follow-up from a follow-up during a sales process. So if I'm trying to get an appointment, I'm not really trying to limit my follow-ups. I'll do a lot of follow-ups, might be by phone, might be by email, leave a message. I'm just trying to get some kind of a hook that will interest them and at least get them to take my phone call. I doubt they'll call me, but if I can get them to take my phone call on one of these, I'm just trying all kinds of follow-up processes, kind of have fun, be creative, say silly things, try to do it 10 days in a row, all those different things to get follow-up going. So that's a really different type of follow-up from if I'm in a sales process. If I'm calling back sometime, 2 weeks later to see what they think of my proposal, I probably already screwed up the sale.
It's not necessarily terminal or fatal.
It's pretty dead. I'm just waiting to have the funeral.
Well, as long as you're still in the game. And what have you got to lose sometimes, so you might be a little bit more risky too. But
yeah, I guess my point is that if you are dropping off proposals and going through the proposal with somebody and saying, okay, how about if I call you back in 2 weeks? You don't have a sales process. You've got a hope process.
Right. Exactly. I totally agree with that. I mean, that's not a sales process. That first impression is so important. I think when you leave a message and you in the message say, if I don't hear from you within 2 days, I'll call you back.
Mm-hmm.
That lays down a promise. When you follow through on that promise, your credibility goes up. So you're initiating a promise, you're following through on it, and you're demonstrating your commitment. And that's the simplest thing you can do right from the beginning, because most of the time when you call, you're going to get voicemail. But if you follow up and then you do that every single time, call them every other day, call them a total of 6, 7, 8 times, and just get to a point where saying, I get the impression that maybe you're no longer in charge of this project or somebody else is involved, or maybe you left the company. If I'm wrong, give me a call by the end of the day. If I don't hear from you, I'll call somebody else and see if they're in charge of it. And now keep in mind, the prospect might come back at you a little hot. So you can just say, well, my intent was not to upset you. My intent was to be able to find out if this is something that you're still working on. And I'm okay with you telling me no, but you never responded to any of the voicemails or the emails. So I wasn't really sure and I had nothing to base it on. So that's the reason I left that message.
Yeah, I don't worry a whole lot. When I'm prospecting, and especially with cold call prospecting, I'm always trying to be kind and I'm always trying to be patient and I'm always trying to do the right thing and be persistent. But, some people are just going to get mad and some people aren't going to get mad. And some people are going to get mad because I called every day for 10 days. And it's like, well, hey, that's what I do. I'm in sales. I try to do the right thing to make a sale happen, and I'm waiting to see if you tell me no. So I'm not always, I try not to get too worried about hurting people's feelings or they don't like my process. I do agree with you that if you make a commitment, I'm going to call you back in 2 days, and you don't do it, it gives them a reason to not do business with you.
Yeah. Sometimes they can get impressed when you get out of really tight spots, though, too.
Oh,
They
yeah.
come back at you a little hot. You go, oh, that's not my intent. And they're like, well, this guy's pretty good.
A lot of the people we talk to, you and I, are sales managers. So one of the things I always say to them is, what do you want your salespeople to be doing? Calling 10 times or giving up after one?
Exactly.
And they go, oh, I didn't think of it that way. And, everything that we do can be an example of what we're going to teach their salespeople to do.
Exactly.
So I think that's important. But let's talk a little bit, if you want to, about the follow-up of a sales process rather than a follow-up during a prospecting process. Mm-hmm. What do you think is the proper course of action?
Well, I think the first step is to begin every call or every appointment with an agenda and expectations. The only way that you can ever disappoint somebody is to not meet their expectations. And it's nice to have an agenda at the beginning of the meeting because you want to know what they want to cover, and then it gives you a chance to share what you want to cover. But another thing we need to confirm is how much time do we have. So if we each have agreed on an hour, then we can go back and forth within the hour. And then at the end of that hour, we need to decide what the next steps are, when they are, the timeline for it, and what the action is. There's no action at all. Maybe there's not a fit, and we just, we
move on
to a point. Right. Yeah. And that's good too. I mean, it's not what we want, but it really saves us a lot of time.
Well, we talked about the full sales funnel that's just full of crap.
Right.
And those are all those hopeful ones out there that, are still thinking about what we gave them that's now on the bottom of their pile and hasn't been looked at. They'd be dusted off if they're going to look at it again. But I agree with you 100% that at the end of that appointment, whatever that appointment is for, whether it's the second, third, fourth appointment, let's make some specific plans about what we're going to do this. And I see too many salespeople that wimp out and say, well, when do you want me to call you again? Well, sometime in a couple of weeks. Okay, that's fine. Yeah. And it's so broad and open that it's really just going to give them that, what are you thinking about type of close.
Right. I think a great follow-up question to that response from the prospect is, I appreciate you sharing that with me. I'm kind of curious what's going to be different in 2 weeks. Now, that's kind of the raw materials in the question. You might need to soften it up a bit, rephrase it to your comfort level, but we need to find out what's going to be different in 2 weeks. Because if nothing's going to be different than 2 weeks, you're not going to be any farther along 2 weeks than you are today. Because nothing's changed.
Right. And if there is a specific plan, then we could try to ingratiate ourselves into parts of that plan. I'm going to be meeting with my boss. Well, would you like me to be there as backup to answer any questions that you can't answer?
Yeah.
So we can do that. I know the other challenge too, and Steve Keating talked about it in podcast 420. And if you didn't listen to podcast 420, you better go back and listen to it because it is great material. But he talked about asking for the order. And I really like one of the things he said is, you're close as you will ever be to whatever it is. Right there, when you're in the office with them, you've sent the proposal out and you're talking about the decision. That's the time to get the decision if you can. You don't lengthen it out so they have, they want to think about it. And the question is, so what is it you want to think about? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, objections, you must be present to win, folks.
Right.
If you're not present, you don't hear the objection, there's no way of you overcoming it. So get it out in the open while you're still there and you have a chance to address it. And I think we did an episode on objections too, so people can go back and look at that.
So what I would say in general about follow-up is, don't get yourself caught in a situation where you just have this vague follow-up. I'll get back to you, or you get back to me, or you're going to talk to your boss and why don't you call me after that. You need to set those points in the ground and give them a guide to follow of dates, and I will call you or you will call me on this date, or you meet with them in the morning or the afternoon, right? It's a series of small closes that move you closer to a decision. And if once you broaden that out and make it more general, the decision gets more and more vague.
Exactly. I think a great question to begin every meeting and every step of the sales process is, what has changed since we last gathered, or has anything changed since the last time we talked?
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing what you'll find out. Have you ever been in this appointment, Bill, where you're having a great conversation for 1
I've been
hour?
in every appointment.
And then they say to you at the end of it, go, thanks for coming in. I want to share some news with you. I'm going to be leaving the company in 2 weeks, and I'm not really sure who's going to be taking over, but I'll ask them to reach out to you as soon as they do.
Oh, yeah.
It's like game over.
That's
It's
right.
dead in the water. Forget
Yeah.
about it.
Thanks for wasting both our hours.
Wouldn't would you have loved to know at that beginning of the meeting, and then spend the hour to find out who's taking over the project?
Right.
Because then you have the person there, you're leaving. Let's find out who it is, who's your boss, who else is here, and let's start introducing me to them so we can continue the conversation.
Yeah, and don't ask them why you got canned, because that's probably rude.
No, that's true. That's true. Sometimes it's nice when you get a warning. It's
Well, I
not
think
nice
this-
when you don't get a warning.
Yeah, I think this emphasizes us back on how important it is to have a good series of questions, and some of those questions should be future oriented. And if you've asked the right questions, these type of things should come out earlier, that they're not the right person or they don't have the decision making power. And those are more common, than I'm leaving. But quite often, the reason we don't have any
Right.
kind of good follow up is we talked to the wrong person. We spent an hour with somebody who can't make a decision until the committee meets, or is going to pass everything on to their boss, who's going to make the real decision anyway. And all you did was talk to the gatekeeper.
So sometimes our prospect has assigned a delegate that they send in place of the decision maker to gather information and to be able to learn everything that we have to offer. And if we spend all of our time giving that person information and not enough time finding about how they make decisions, or find out what kind of criteria they're looking for, or what other options they're looking for, we're going to be the knowledge booth, and we're going to be giving all this information to somebody who cannot make a decision, and we're not going to be moving the ball down the field. We need to get the decision maker in the room to be able to ask them questions about the criteria, the process, the reasons for making a change, etc.
One of the good questions to ask is something along the lines of, if I can show you something that's going to meet the needs, are you ready to buy? Or do you have the authority to make the decision? And I do think that it's fair sometimes for us to ask those types of questions. I jokingly tell a story about when I was working in retail in a stereo store, and some kid came in and he had me moving stereos. That's when we had speakers and everything was separate. And he had me moving it all over the store, and I totally destroyed all of my setups. And finally he said, "Thanks, man," and left.
Oh, God.
And if I just ask the question, if I put together a system that you like, are you ready to buy? And he had said, well, not really. Then I could have said, you can listen to the speakers here, and you can listen to this tape deck over here.
Yeah.
And I don't need to take everything apart to make it look good for you. And we do that all the time as salespeople. We jump through all kinds of hoops and get nothing for it.
Yeah.
So to ask the question is, if I can show you something, if I can answer that question, if I can find a solution for that, are you ready to move forward with this? And if they're not, why are you giving them a solution?
Right. Or another good question may be, if I were to do that, what would happen next?
Yeah.
And then we find out what the next step is. Well, we're moving the ball down the field, and hopefully we're going to find out if that person's involved or other people are involved, or what the timeline is. I always like it when we start talking about budget, and they go, well, we got about $15,000 to invest this. And I go, okay, well, I won't show you anything that's over $15,000. Well, wait a minute. What? You're going to hold something back from me? Well, yeah, you said you've got a budget of $15,000. I said, if it was over $15,000, would you want to hear about it? Well, yeah. Okay. Well, now they're telling me that budget is not as firm as they first said it is.
Right. Trap them with their own words.
Right. Well,
by challenging them. And there goes back to the challenger sale, right?
Yeah.
So that's another way to challenge them, is through good, well thought out questions that don't be, and this part goes back to the follow-up, Scott.
Yeah.
Don't be a doormat.
Right.
You are a professional salesperson who brings value to the conversation, brings new ideas, brings new energy, and you don't just have to say, okay, whatever you want, that's fine. Right. Challenge them with questions about budget, decision making, where this is going from here, and don't be a doormat that just gives all kinds of information, sends 500 brochures, throws them a catalog and says, hopefully you'll find something you like.
Right. Exactly. There's a good acronym, ABL, always be listening and don't be desperate.
Yeah, don't be desperate. So, Scott, do you have any resources that you want to talk about?
I don't, but I think you do, Bill.
I do.
I've got resources. If they go to the website, mnsales.com, I've got plenty of blogs and videos there.
Yeah. And I do have an article or a blog, if you wish, called When Prospects Hesitate. And it's about what to do to keep people moving forward. So the link for that will be on our information page. This segment has been brought to you by the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program, presented by the hosts of the Get in the Door podcast.
Business is heating up, and now is the time to get back on the selling track. While others wait for the market to improve, prospects and opportunities await you now. Perhaps you want to be more productive on your prospecting, or you'd like to increase your closing percentage. Maybe having meetings online is not as comfortable as being in person. Sales reps are telling us they need some honest accountability and skill development to rise above the competition. Whatever your reason, this is the perfect time to engage with an experienced sales coach. That is why the host of Get in the Door podcast, Professor Scott Plum and Bill Hellkamp, have developed the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program. For only $495, you can receive personal coaching from the same sales professionals you enjoy on this podcast. It all starts with a discussion to give us your insights into your specific goals, challenges, needs, and motivation. After your 1-hour online session to jumpstart your coaching process, you will receive 5 more half-hour individual coaching sessions to enable you to make improvements over time and create new habits. Most salespeople make their money back with just one sale. Go to getinthedoorpodcast.com to contact Bill or Scott about the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program. Do you believe you deserve better results? Now is the time to invest in yourself and invest in your future.
Well, as we close up, let's go to our golden nugget. This one is by Zig Ziglar, one of the consummate sales gurus, presenters, trainers. And he said, people often say that motivation doesn't last. Well, neither does bathing. That's why we recommend it daily.
Good old Zig. It's a really important thing to remember.
And he probably got down in a crouch and said it in a whisper.
In a nice Texan Southern drawl voice. That's right. Good old Zig. Love his tapes. Still have them.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just important to remember that. We're faced with constant adversities, and we need to remember our why every day, and remembering that it's not about the money, it's what the money will do. And keeping Zig in mind will be very helpful.
Well, I hope that you'll find these podcasts somewhat motivational, be able to get you fired up for your sales day with new ideas and new ways of doing things. So that may be a way to get that daily motivation in. And there's a lot of great podcasts out there that you can get motivated by.
So all of our resources are going to be on the website, getinthedoorpodcast.com. Please share that on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, anywhere you share information with your network.
That's great. Next week, we'll start with Chapter 5 of the Challenger Sale, Teaching for Differentiation, Part 2, How to Build Insight-Led Conversations. And our topic will be, you must overcome fear. Go out and get better one skill at a time.
Joyful selling.